It was supposed to be just another Tuesday morning, calm, predictable, until the silence of our neighborhood was shattered by the distant wail of an ambulance. I looked outside and saw it turning onto our street, sirens blazing, clearly racing against time. But the vehicle came to a dead stop right in front of my house, and for a second I thought maybe they had the wrong address. Then I saw her, Karen, arms folded, standing in the middle of the road like she owned it. The paramedics leaned out, signaling frantically, trying to get her to move, but she didn't budge. Instead, she shouted something about how they're not allowed to park here. The worst part? I knew who the ambulance was here for. It was my elderly neighbor, Mrs. Jenkins. Her daughter had run outside moments earlier, screaming for help after finding her collapsed on the kitchen floor. And now we were all stuck watching as a grown woman literally blocked a life-saving emergency vehicle over what seemed like a petty parking grudge. One paramedic tried reasoning with her, calmly explaining they had a patient inside they needed to reach quickly. But Karen didn't care. She doubled down, saying the ambulance could go around or wait like everyone else. That's when the shouting started. The paramedics weren't aggressive, just desperate, and her stubbornness only fueled the tension. Neighbors were stepping out, phones were coming out, and someone even started recording. But still, she stood there like a gatekeeper of chaos. And as the seconds ticked by and Mrs. Jenkins' fate hung in limbo, we all realized this wasn't just rude. It was dangerous. Karen wasn't going to move, and none of us had any clue just how bad things were about to get. The tension was so thick you could feel it pressing down on your chest, like the whole block was holding its breath, waiting for something to give. The ambulance sat idle, lights flashing red against Karen's face, like a warning signal she was too arrogant to acknowledge. One of the paramedics stepped out. Young guy, maybe mid-30s, eyes serious but calm, and walked up to her with the kind of patience only someone trained to save lives could manage. "Ma'am," he said, with urgency but restraint, "we have a critical patient inside who needs immediate help. Please step aside." "And Karen?" She let out a laugh, not just a smirk or a scoff, a full-blown arms-crossed laugh, like someone had just told her the most ridiculous joke. "I don't care who's in that van," she snapped, voice sharp enough to slice the air. "You can't just park wherever you want. This is a neighborhood. We have rules, and your big ugly truck is on my property." Her property? The ambulance was on a public road, barely kissing the edge of the curb. But in her entitled little world, that was enough to justify blocking an emergency response. The paramedic blinked, clearly trying to maintain composure. "Ma'am, you're obstructing emergency care. If we don't reach the patient in the next few minutes—" "That's not my problem," Karen cut in. "You people always think the rules don't apply to you. You could have parked down the street like everyone else." The paramedic's partner had now gotten out too, pacing nervously, clearly aware of how dangerous this delay was. In the distance, I could still hear Mrs. Jenkins' daughter screaming from the porch, begging for someone to do something. And meanwhile, Karen stood there like a statue, armed with ego instead of empathy. The neighbors who had come out during the first few minutes were now growing restless. One older man shouted from across the street, "Lady, get out of the way. Someone could die." But that only made Karen more defensive. "Don't yell at me," she screamed back. "You don't know the law. I know my rights." She wasn't just being difficult. She was creating a scene. One neighbor had pulled out their phone and was live-streaming it on Facebook. Another woman was recording on TikTok, whispering commentary like it was a reality TV show. You could hear her say, "This is insane. She's literally blocking a rescue over—" What? Her imaginary driveway? But Karen, lost in her delusional sense of justice, kept shouting about how the ambulance should have called ahead or waited for police clearance, like this was some kind of event with red tape and RSVPs. The paramedic, now visibly shaking with frustration, stepped back and muttered something into his radio. That's when the word dispatch hit Karen's ears, and she flipped. "You better not be calling the cops on me," she shrieked, her voice rising in pitch. "I'll have your jobs. I pay taxes. I know people in the mayor's office." That line sent a ripple of disbelief through everyone within earshot. A few people actually laughed. Because it was so over the top, it felt like a script from a satire skit. But Karen wasn't joking. Her face had gone red, her eyes wide, her voice trembling not with fear, but rage. And still, she didn't move. It had been almost 10 minutes now. 10 minutes of life-or-death delay because one woman decided to assert dominance over an ambulance. The paramedic spoke again, slower this time. "Ma'am, if you don't move now, you will be charged with obstruction of emergency services. We are calling the police." And with that, Karen crossed her arms tighter, raised her chin like a villain in a bad soap opera, and said the words that made every jaw drop. "Then arrest me. Let's see you try." That's when the second paramedic made the call. Clear, calm, and straight to the point. "Dispatch, we need law enforcement assistance at our location. Civilian blocking emergency access. Unresponsive to verbal commands." A cold silence followed. Karen looked around, suddenly noticing how many cameras were on her. But she didn't care. She straightened her back and snapped, "I'll have every one of you sued. This is harassment." Across the street, a neighbor's kid, maybe 14, muttered under his breath, "She's going viral for sure." And he wasn't wrong. The video was already spreading, and comments were rolling in live. "This is attempted murder," someone typed. "Block an ambulance and you deserve jail," another wrote. Still, Karen stood her ground. I couldn't believe what I was watching. A literal standoff between entitlement and emergency care. It was the kind of moment that makes your blood boil, not just because of the danger, but because of the sheer audacity. And as the distant sound of a police siren started to echo in the background, every eye turned toward the corner of the street. Karen heard it too, and for the first time she flinched, but instead of stepping aside or showing even a sliver of regret, she dug her heels in deeper. "Let them come," she yelled. "I'll file complaints. I'll call my lawyer." But it was too late. The situation had spiraled beyond her control, and everyone watching knew. The moment the cops arrived, things were going to explode. Just as the rising tension on the street felt like it would snap, the sound of police sirens pierced the heavy silence like a blade. The flashing blue lights bounced off car windows, street signs, and even Karen's stunned face. You could almost see the shift in energy as every bystander collectively held their breath. A pair of patrol cars pulled up fast, no hesitation. The doors flew open, and two officers stepped out with sharp urgency. One male, one female, both wearing the kind of expression that said they'd seen too much nonsense already that day. The lead officer, Officer Ramirez, a tall man with a commanding presence, immediately scanned the scene. His eyes moved from the ambulance stuck behind Karen's parked car to the flustered paramedics, to Karen herself. Arms folded, chin up, fire in her eyes. He didn't even have to ask what was going on. The chaos practically screamed for itself, but still, he walked up calmly and addressed her like he was giving her one last chance to act like a rational human being. "Ma'am, why are you blocking emergency medical personnel?" Karen didn't flinch. "Because they're illegally parked and refusing to move," she shot back, as if that made any sense in the context of flashing lights, a critical medical emergency, and half the neighborhood standing witness. The female officer, Officer Lynn, stepped toward the paramedics. "Is someone in critical condition?" One of them nodded quickly. "Yes. Elderly woman, suspected heart attack, time sensitive." "We've already lost 12 minutes. That made Officer Lynn's face tighten. She turned toward Officer Ramirez, clearly ready to move. But Karen wasn't done. "They can't just barge into a residential area like this," she snapped. "There are rules. If we let people break them whenever they want, then what's the point of having laws?" Officer Ramirez took a long breath, like he was trying to summon the patience of a monk. "Ma'am, the law allows emergency vehicles to prioritize life over property lines. You are in direct violation of obstruction of emergency services." And here's where Karen made her fatal mistake. Instead of backing down, instead of doing the basic human thing and moving her car, she laughed. Again. Not nervous laughter. Not embarrassed. That same unhinged, smug cackle she had when the paramedic first approached her. "Oh, please," she scoffed. "I know my rights. I've studied this. I have friends in law enforcement. I'll sue your department if you try anything." The officers exchanged a quick glance that said more than words ever could. And then Ramirez asked the question that made everyone's heart jump. "Do you have ID on you?" Karen blinked. "What? Why? I'm not the one causing the problem." Officer Lin stepped in, voice firmer now. "You are the one preventing emergency responders from doing their job. That's a crime, ma'am. Either move your car now, or we will be forced to take legal action." "Legal action? Are you threatening me?" Karen's voice hit a new pitch. Her whole body language changed. Tense, defensive, indignant, but still refusing to budge. "You people think, just because you wear a badge, you can treat everyone like a criminal? I'm a taxpayer. I'm a homeowner. I know the mayor." That's when someone in the crowd, someone who'd clearly had enough, yelled out, "Shut up and let them do their job." Karen spun around. "Did you just threaten me?" she shrieked, completely ignoring the fact that the officers were now clearly positioning themselves to act. "This is harassment. You're all ganging up on me. I have rights." "Yes, ma'am. And you're about to exercise them at the station if you don't move your vehicle now," Ramirez said. But Karen doubled down. Hard. "I'm not moving it. You'll have to tow it. Or better yet, arrest me. I dare you." And just like that, Officer Ramirez gave the nod. Officer Lin stepped forward and informed Karen, formally and clearly, "You are under arrest for obstruction of emergency services. You have the right to remain silent." That's when Karen snapped. "Don't touch me. Don't you dare touch me." But it was too late. Lynn took hold of her arm and started guiding her toward the police cruiser. Karen resisted. Of course she did. She kicked, screamed, and cursed like a toddler denied a toy. "This is police brutality. I'll sue every one of you. You're making a huge mistake." Phones went up. Cameras zoomed in. And Karen, now in full meltdown mode, was being filmed from every angle. Her screams echoed down the block, but no one came to her defense. No one shouted for mercy. In fact, a few claps broke out. It was surreal. As they handcuffed her and placed her into the back of the patrol car, she kept shouting, "This is a setup! You're all going to regret this!" Officer Ramirez turned to the paramedics and gave them the clear signal to move through. Within seconds, the ambulance engine roared to life, and they were off, racing toward the hospital with sirens screaming into the distance. Everyone stood in silence for a moment, processing what had just happened. A life-or-death emergency had been stalled by sheer entitlement. And even with the flashing lights and the warnings, Karen had chosen ego over empathy. Officer Lin stayed behind to take statements, while Ramirez drove Karen away, still ranting in the back seat about lawsuits and media conspiracies. One neighbor shook their head and muttered, "She's going to be famous for all the wrong reasons." And they were right, because within minutes, the video clips were viral. TikTok, Twitter, Facebook, everyone had something to say. The hashtags were brutal. Ambulance Karen, ja emergency blocker. Jail time for Karen. And the comments, even worse. No one was defending her. Not one person. Everyone saw the truth, clear as day, and the internet had already made up its mind. But as the night settled in and the street finally calmed, one thing lingered in the air. Shock. Shock that someone could go so far just to prove a point no one asked them to make. And yet, there was still more fallout to come. Because as wild as Karen's arrest was, the aftermath, the public shaming, the legal consequences, and the media storm was about to be even worse. Karen's wrists were bound behind her designer bag still hanging awkwardly off one elbow, as Officer Ramirez shut the back door of the police cruiser. Her face, once smug and confident, was now pale and tight with panic, the weight of the moment finally beginning to sink in. But, of course, Karen didn't stay quiet. Even with the door closed, you could hear her muffled shouting from inside the squad car. "You'll all regret this. I have friends in high places. You just wait," she screamed, her voice cracking under the strain of false bravado. But the truth was written all over her trembling posture. Reality was crashing in, fast and hard. The ride to the station wasn't long, but it felt endless for her. She tried negotiating, then threatening, then crying. Ramirez didn't say a word. He'd seen this type before. Entitled people who thought consequences were optional. When they arrived at the station, Karen was still running her mouth, but her voice was softer now, less rage, more fear. The harsh fluorescence of the booking area did her no favors. Her mascara had smudged from angry tears, her shirt was wrinkled, and her once perfect blowout had collapsed into a frizzy mess. This wasn't the image she wanted anyone to remember her by, but it was too late. The booking officer looked at her, unimpressed. "Name?" she scoffed. "You should know who I am." He didn't blink. "Name?" "Karen Mitchell." The moment her name was entered into the system, it was over. Fingerprints, mugshot, holding cell. And the screams in her head were louder than the ones she had been yelling on the street. The truth was, her arrest hadn't just been witnessed by neighbors, it had been filmed, posted, and now it was everywhere. As she sat on the cold bench in that holding cell, the officer's phone buzzed. A colleague nudged him and showed him a viral video already at 500,000 views. "Isn't that the woman in holding?" he muttered. The officers didn't say much, but their expressions said it all. Karen had become that woman, and while she sat there, oblivious to the scale of her downfall, the world was watching, judging, laughing, and waiting for justice. Meanwhile, back in the neighborhood, things weren't quiet either. People were gathering in groups, talking about what had just happened. One neighbor pulled out her phone and read aloud. "It's on Reddit now. Front page. Entitled, 'Woman Blocks. Ambulance Gets Arrested on Camera.' Over 10,000 comments already. And then came the text messages. The HOA chat exploded. Karen had always been vocal in the group. Bossy, nitpicky, constantly quoting rules to make herself sound important. But now, silence. Not a single message from her. People posted memes. One guy shared a gif of a woman getting dragged away while holding a sign that said, "I know the mayor." The community wasn't just shocked. They were thrilled. Karen had made everyone's lives miserable for years, and now her own choices had publicly humiliated her. But the worst blow hadn't even landed yet. Her husband arrived at the police station later that evening. A quiet, awkward man named Greg, who looked like he was used to apologizing for his wife's behavior. He stood at the front desk, holding a jacket and looking thoroughly exhausted. "I'm here for Karen Mitchell," he said quietly. The desk sergeant just nodded and buzzed the door. A few moments later, Karen emerged, now out of the holding cell but still reeling. Her eyes darted everywhere, as if she expected paparazzi to jump out of the shadows. "Greg," she whispered, "this is all a misunderstanding. You have to call the mayor, or a lawyer, or—" "Karen," he said, his voice low and worn, I saw the video. That stopped her cold. You what? The video. Everyone's seen it. My boss asked me if you were really my wife. Karen's mouth fell open, speechless for once. You don't understand, she finally stammered. They were rude. They parked wrong. I was protecting the neighborhood. Greg didn't look convinced. You blocked an ambulance. There was a woman dying in there. You turned it into a standoff. You dared the cops to arrest you. And then you screamed about conspiracies. What were you thinking? Karen's defenses cracked. I didn't mean for it to get that far. They provoked me. They acted like I was the villain. Karen, he said again, more gently this time, you were the villain. She didn't reply, just stared at the floor as the weight of her choices pressed down like a boulder. He handed her the jacket and didn't say another word. On the ride home, she checked her phone. And that was its own nightmare. Her inbox was full. Not with sympathy, not with support, but with rage. Messages from family, co-workers, old friends. What the hell were you thinking? You've embarrassed yourself and your community. You need help. Even her workplace had sent a formal HR email. Please do not return until further notice pending internal review. And just when she thought it couldn't get worse, she opened Facebook. The HOA had already scheduled an emergency meeting. Topic: Misconduct and damage to community image. Underneath were comments from dozens of members demanding she be removed from the board, barred from speaking at meetings, even suggesting she move. And someone had posted her mugshot. Full screen. Captioned, "When entitlement becomes criminal." The image was already getting shared. Karen couldn't look away. It felt like watching her own life fall off a cliff in slow motion. The next few days were a blur of silence, shame, and attempts at damage control. She tried posting a long apology on her neighborhood page. It was deleted. She tried messaging neighbors individually. No one responded. She even tried calling a local news station to clear her name, but they had already aired a segment titled "Entitled Karen Blocks Ambulance, Backlash Grows." And they had used the video, all of it, including the part where she shrieked, "I know my rights," at the officers while getting cuffed. Karen wasn't just a viral moment. She was a warning now, a living, breathing case study of how ego, arrogance, and entitlement could explode in your face when pointed in the wrong direction. And in that silence that filled her home now, stripped of her fake power, ignored by her community, rejected by her workplace, and under scrutiny from the law, Karen finally sat still. For the first time in what felt like years, she didn't argue, didn't shout, didn't lecture. She sat there, alone with the sound of her own breathing and the realization that she wasn't the victim. She was the lesson. Karen hadn't left her house in over a week. The blinds stayed shut all day, the lights dim even in the middle of the afternoon. Outside, the world kept moving, but inside her once proud two-story colonial, everything had come to a stop. Her phone was still buzzing, but she didn't check it anymore. She didn't need to. Every notification was another reminder of what she had become. Not long ago, she was the self-declared queen of the neighborhood, dictating lawn heights, sending stern messages in the HOA group, and correcting people's parking with the zeal of a power-drunk mall cop. But now, she was the Karen, the viral Karen, the woman who blocked an ambulance and screamed about conspiracies before getting cuffed on camera. The internet had no mercy. Within 48 hours of the video going viral, it had been shared on every major social platform. Twitter had a trending hashtag, #AmbulanceKaren. TikTokers reenacted the scene dramatically. YouTubers made reaction videos. Reddit had dissected her behavior down to psychological layers. Even the local news had picked it up again, calling her a symbol of neighborhood entitlement gone wrong. But the story didn't stop at embarrassment. Oh no, The real consequences were just beginning. Her workplace had officially terminated her due to reputational damage. Karen had been with the company for 12 years, climbing ranks not because of her warmth, but because she knew how to play politics. But there's no politics strong enough to shield you from half the internet calling you out by name. Her HR manager didn't even give a full explanation. Just one cold sentence in the email. Your behavior violates our code of ethics. Her husband, Greg, barely spoke now. They lived in the same house, ate at the same table, but there was a canyon of silence between them. He slept in the guest room. The shame he felt didn't come from the internet. It came from watching the woman he married turn into a monster and realizing he hadn't stopped it. Their kids? Oh, the kids were the worst part. Her teenage son, already navigating the war zone of high school, came home with red eyes and clenched fists. Everyone's seen it, Mom. My friends showed me in class. Even the teacher looked at me like I was trash. Karen had no words, just tears, but the damage was done. Her daughter refused to come out of her room. Greg suggested they take a family break, go somewhere, escape for a while. Karen laughed bitterly. And go where? Everyone knows my face. I can't even go to the grocery store without someone filming me. She was right. One attempt at stepping outside resulted in a woman pulling out her phone and filming from across the street, whispering, "That's her. That's the one who blocked the ambulance." Karen rushed back inside, breathless, like she'd seen a ghost. But it wasn't a ghost. It was her own actions coming back to haunt her. Then came the final nail. The HOA. The same HOA where Karen once strutted around like a general in charge of a private army. They held an emergency vote, and the results were unanimous. She was removed from the board, banned from holding any future position, and fined for public endangerment and community embarrassment. But it didn't stop there. Neighbors she'd tormented for years now found their voices. One by one, they shared their own stories. How Karen had threatened to fine an elderly couple for their wind chimes, yelled at a new mother for having a stroller on her porch, reported a veteran for displaying the American flag too prominently. The quiet ones had had enough. And now, with the community emboldened by her downfall, people demanded real change. The HOA restructured. New rules were made about abuse of power. A neighborhood committee was formed specifically to review complaints against board members. Karen had started a fire, but the neighborhood decided to use it to rebuild. Back in her house, Karen stared at the TV. She didn't cry anymore. She was too numb. She flipped through channels, and there it was again. A talk show host joking about Ambulance Karen with a studio audience laughing in the background. She was a punchline, and not the kind you recover from. Her inbox was full of interview requests, some from major media outlets, some from sketchy podcasts looking to exploit her story. She deleted them all. The idea of sitting in front of a camera and explaining what happened felt impossible. What would she even say? I got drunk on power and thought I was untouchable. There was nothing left to say. And yet, somewhere out there, people were learning from this. Viewers watched the story not just to laugh, but to reflect. They thought about the Karens in their own lives, the unchecked authority in their communities, the times they stayed quiet when someone else needed a voice. Karen's story wasn't just about her downfall, it was about a system that let people like her rise in the first place. A reminder that silence gives power to the wrong people, and that standing up, filming, speaking out, those actions matter. So if you made it this far into the story, ask yourself, how many Karens have you seen? How many have you let slide by because it was easier not to get involved? Stories like these aren't just entertaining, they're important. They show us what entitlement looks like when it crosses a line. And that's why this channel exists, to tell the stories others are too afraid to share. If you felt angry, shocked, or empowered while listening, then this story did its job. Subscribe to the channel, not just for more jaw-dropping tales like this, but because every view, every comment, every share helps push back against the Karens of the world and gives a voice to the ones they try to silence. Don't just be a listener, be part of the reason the next Karen gets called out before it's too late.